Welcome to the 3A's podcast, Ancestral Health, Austrian Economics, and Awareness Mindfulness, the 3A's. And welcome to the 3A's podcast. My name is Zachary Shelton, and this is episode 1. Before we get started, let me just briefly talk about what the 3A's is all about. Ancestral Health, Austrian Economics, and Awareness Mindfulness we will be discussing in these podcasts, but not necessarily in that order or neatly in those categories will the discussions take us. These are the three things in my life that when I really looked at the turning points, it was about 10, 15 years ago when I first discovered F.A. Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, about 5, 6 years ago when I started the paleo diet and then became part of the Ancestral Health movement and community, and then just recently over the last year really understood about how to live in the now. And as I've discovered, all three of those things together make quite a profound change on a person regarding their coping skills, their health, and the way they relate to other people. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started in these discussions. Our first guest is Kristi Beguin from Primal Ground. We had a great discussion, and I'd like to share it with you. Okay, hello, welcome to the 3A's podcast, Ancestral Austrian Awareness. And on our show today, we have Kristi Beguin from Primal Ground. How are you doing, Kristi?
Hi, I'm doing great, thanks.
Well, we're really excited to have you on the show. Kristi, as many of you know, is an herbalist, author, martial artist, ecologist, mama, and wife, and she also does doulas.
I'm a doula.
That's right. And the first time that I even came across that word was about 9 years ago when our firstborn was being delivered. So I am very, very much interested in talking about that subject as well. So, Kristi, what can you tell me about Primal Ground?
Okay, so Primal Ground is my business that I'm trying to pull together a variety of different topics. So I'm particularly interested in women's health. I'm also, because I'm a martial artist, I'm very interested in awareness and connection with the outside. And basically, Primal Ground is my concept for bringing together these concepts into sort of one container and presenting them to people in the ancestral health lifestyle community. And basically I'd like to be offering all kinds of different programs, and I'm also working on a book, and so hopefully that can be incorporated as well.
That's great. You know, as a martial artist and someone who is delivering babies, that is quite an interesting service offering that you have incorporated there. Are you one of the only martial artist doulas that you know?
That's a good question. Actually, in my community, we have a lot of doulas. We actually just started a doula service community. We're called the 10 Moons Collective, and there's quite a number of us that are in. We're actually in a very small community. We only have 17,000 residents who live here, but we do serve other clientele in the nearby regions. New Mexico is a pretty spread out state, so you know, each community is sort of small, and there's a big distance between them, but they're still somewhat connected. So as far as in my personal group, I do believe I'm the only martial artist that's currently practicing, although one of our more senior doulas was also a martial artist in my particular taekwondo group that I've been a part of for 25 years. But it is a great combination, you know. I mean, martial artists are strong, you know, they are aware, we do a lot of breathing, and those things certainly came into play when I was giving birth to my children.
Yes, and you had mentioned that this is something that is maybe your main service for your clients is based around women offerings. But what I really appreciated about your site and your writings and just the way that you bring up some of the topics, it's certainly advantageous for these women's partners. So is that something that you also make a conscious effort of, to make a big tent, as you will, for your service?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, being a doula, you're definitely involved with the family, with the couple. You know, sometimes women have their children present for the births, and so you really are there to support the family and the family unit, and that definitely includes the partner, whether it be a husband or another female partner, as well as the children. Yeah, just to be a good, strong, solid, you know, grounding source for those people.
Right. One of the things that this show is about is looking at ancestral health, Austrian economics from the sake of looking at free markets and people such as yourself having the businesses and delivering these needs to these services to people that have these needs, and awareness. And it's very interesting that as a doula with your ancestral health background, what is your sort of sticky point in terms of wanting these clients to understand, let's say, the health benefits for a pregnant woman for ancestral health, but maybe they're still on the standard American diet? That, I would suppose, that's a very sensitive subject to broach at first.
Well, it is. So, as an herbalist, I've been an herbalist far longer than I have been a part of the ancestral health community. I've been doing herbal studies. Basically, I started way back in the early 90s, and I have been teaching and leading and guiding herbal classes since then, so since about 1992. And as an herbalist, basically, health is it's always centered around the diet. And so with women in particular, I would approach them, with regards basically from my herbalist standpoint. But it's pretty easy once the ancestral health, once people recognize and understand the benefits that they can gain from certain aspects of the ancestral health diet, basically, I think that people are pretty receptive to making just small changes. And I would certainly never require that a client of mine make wholesale changes across the board, because that can be too much, especially when a woman's pregnant. But, just giving them good ideas, giving them sort of a layout, a base plan, shopping list, that sort of thing.
Well, in that process of change, and as you said, I think that's one thing that I've come across too with friends and family. You don't want to be the food police or the awareness police or even the Austrian economic police when you have some insights that others don't. What is one of the biggest challenges, even when you're not trying to push it, that your clients, whether they are coming to you as with you working in the capacity as an herbalist or a doula, what are the biggest challenges that they go through with the process of change?
Well, I think most women, when they're pregnant, are just generally, they're concerned about the health of their babies. They want to ensure that their baby is going to be as healthy as they possibly can be. And of course, when they're tucked down inside the tummy, we just don't know what's going on with that baby, other than, what the midwives or the doctors can measure and that sort of thing. So really challenges, I think, are just, inspiring women, keeping their mental health high, keeping their level of awareness of their, how well they're feeling. Are they feeling tired? Are they fatigued? Are they doing too much? That sort of thing. So that's really where, as a doula and an herbalist, that I approach women is just trying to really understand how they're feeling and letting that sort of be the driver for whether or not they need to make subtle changes to their diet, or whether they need perhaps to exercise more or less, whether some sort of a supplement might help.
Yes, and I've seen the combination of all of that, the optimizing of my health and performance with supplementation, but just with the combination of awareness and with training. It's all part of, different legs underneath the table. So it sounds like you're covering all of the different bases. And I unfortunately didn't have the chance to see you at the Ancestral Health Symposium, but that was the crux of your presentation, correct?
Well, so actually the crux of my presentation was about how the medical management of birth and labor in particular alters the normal physiological hormonal process in women when they're in labor and before they give birth and shortly after they give birth. So when those hormones and that endocrine system is disrupted, it affects the mother and it affects the baby. And there are epigenetic studies that show that when these hormones are disrupted or altered from the normal physiological process, that health problems can come to play later in life. So obesity, metabolic disorders, other endocrine-related disorders. So that's
Yes.
really, I mean, I'm super passionate about getting that information out to people, because 94% of all births in the United States in 2012, I believe, had one or more medical intervention. And that's out of about 4 million births. And 98% of all births occur in the hospital. So 98% of all women are basically, they're going to have to make a decision as to whether or not they want this medical intervention if it's unnecessary. And that includes things like breaking the water, having an epidural, that sort of thing. But what I try to do, and really the purpose of my poster and in discussing this with the ancestral health community, is that many women don't have access to home birth options, and so they presume that because they're living an ancestral health lifestyle, that they're healthy, they're strong, they're aware, they're going to go to the hospital and they're going to have the birth that they want, but the statistics are not in their favor.
Yes, there's a great Jim Gaffigan, who's a comedian. He has a great bit about telling the audience that they home birthed their child, and there's just a silence, and he said, "Yeah, I expected that reaction. Why would I want to take my baby to where all the sick people congregate? Not to say that I'm judging people that do have births. I mean, our doula actually helped us at the hospital, which is maybe something that bridges that gap, but it still doesn't speak to your point that you're not entirely independent to have the birth that you want when you're at the hospital."
Correct. Unless, in an ideal circumstance, you would have a doula, that a woman would choose to have a doula or a supportive, caring person that, they love. So it could be a mother, a sister, a good friend, as long as they have a really solid support team, that's the first step. And many women choose to give birth in the hospital for very valid reasons, but I really feel that as long as they understand what each medical intervention does to the body, and as long as they understand their choices and why those choices should be made, and also understanding and recognizing that the doctors are not, just because they're the doctors, we always have this idea that they're the ones in charge. And the reality is that the doctors, we are their clients, and we can pick and choose them. And if they're not operating in a manner that we desire, then we can certainly fire the doctor, essentially, and make choices that will benefit ourselves.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of a gentleman by the name of Carl Lenore. I was very pleased. He hosts a show called Superhuman Radio, and he was there. I had a great chance to talk with him. And he has this great quote as regards doctors, that if you took your car to a mechanic shop and you just didn't like the mechanic, you didn't feel like he was really giving you the up and up, or not to be, underneath the table, but perhaps you just didn't agree with his advice about what to do next, you wouldn't feel so, hesitant about taking it to another garage, provided that you could actually start your car and drive it down the street. But we are empowered to seek alternatives. So when you were at the Ancestral Health Symposium and had a chance to not only talk about your message, but hear so many others, how was that experience? How receptive was your message, and what were some of the things that you learned there?
Well, that's just awesome. I really, really enjoyed the symposium. AHS 13 was fantastic. I heard about the Ancestral Health Symposium last year while it was going on, and at that time I said, I am going next year. And when the call for proposals came out, it's funny, just a little background before I get into my opinion, but I was thinking, there's no way. I have nothing to present, and I just sort of blew it off. And about 2 or 3 days after the call for proposals came out, I was swimming, and I swim early in the morning, and I tend to get in a really, really solid mental space when I'm swimming because it's just so repetitive. And all of a sudden, I was just flooded with all of these ideas about how to bring the topic of pregnancy, epigenetics, hormones, birth into the community, because I really felt like I hadn't seen very much information presented about that side of the health issue. And I've taken 2 doula trainings. for certifications, basically just a repeat of the same course because a good friend was offering it again last year, and so I attended it a second time and was just filled with so much information related to the hormones and the epigenetics and how it affects babies and how it affects mothers and how it affects relationships when things go wrong during a birth. And it just all came together at that moment when I was swimming. So I went back home, I typed up my proposal and submitted it that very day.
That's great.
And it was so overjoyed that it was accepted. I mean, I was in shock for quite a while and just really on a big high. So attending the symposium as a presenter was just an absolute honor. And I thought that my message was very well received. As just in the process of introducing myself to people were very interested in the herbalist side of my background. So I thought that was pretty cool as well, because herbalism is all about foraging and being self-reliant, and I also have not heard a lot about that in the ancestral health community. So as far as the presentations go, I mean, most of them were just knockout, awesome. I thought Terry Walls was amazing. Kyle Maynard was amazing. I really, really enjoyed the clinical provider workshop, which Rick Henriksen had invited me to while we were at the conference, because it had already been booked full before the actual event. Just, a lot of information. Some of it I felt was sort of cursory, but great for people who are new to the lifestyle. And then there was, some of the keynote speakers I thought just presented some really great topics. Chris Kresser's topic was wonderful. I really love discussions about the microbiomes within our body and on our skin and how important they are to our health. So just so many different things were pretty mind-blowing. I definitely left feeling very, very saturated.
Well, all those folks that you mentioned, I know that they're going to be publishing the presentations. We're going to link all of those up. If we don't have their presentations up and running by the time that this posts, we'll definitely put their websites and how you could learn more about Chris Kresser and Terry Walls and so forth. My experience at the Ancestral Health Symposium, and maybe this somewhat mirrors yours, is that for that 3 days, you are amongst your people. And there is no inhibitions about speaking, particularly the things that you're most interested in and that your practice revolves around. So you don't have to pause and look at someone whose eyebrow is askew and say, "Oh, let me explain it first for you and get past this roadblock." So these conversations are just so much more free flowing and you're easier to make the connections of all of the different things that you're going to and learn new connections because you are amongst your people. The one, I guess, letdown, I don't want to call it a letdown, it's kind of like a post-glow high, is that when you come back to where you live, it's shocking that all people aren't at that same level of understanding about those subjects. It's not a bad thing, but it takes a day or two to get used to it after being amongst all of those great, both thought leaders and folks that are just adherents and just the fellowship of it all. Was that sort of your experience too?
Oh yeah, it was wonderful, and the food too. I mean, I thought everything from the speaker dinner to the dinner that we ate on Saturday night. Out of the Mary Gay house. I mean, everything was just so delicious. And, even when I was just on my own, like the one breakfast when I just ate at the hotel buffet, all the people in there, everybody's at the buffet and they're all hitting the same things. And that was pretty funny, I mean, everybody was just, it's like, well, the bacon was gone and the berries were gone. And
I'm sure the hotel staff.
There's a huge line.
I'm sure the hotel staff couldn't figure out why there was this huge batch of waffles that just remained untouched.
No kidding.
Well, speaking of your work as an herbalist, how has your work as an herbalist changed after adopting many of the tenets of ancestral health, or has really have you always sort of practiced your diet and exercise regime in such a manner where nothing has changed in terms of your herbalism capacity?
Well, things haven't changed too much. I think that, herbalist, especially from, I have a pretty solid Chinese medicine background. You know, food is basically the medicine. And Chinese medicine conflicts with that a little bit because they do prescribe legumes, specific kinds of beans are considered medicine. And so I'm not sure that I would disagree with the fact that they would, you know, prescribe that sort of thing, you know, but it definitely would make me question whether or not that would be an appropriate thing to do. But, you know, basically food has always been the focus. So if somebody's unwell, the very first thing you want to know about is their food and sleep. So, you know, those are the two things that I've always approached my practice from. And so that hasn't changed very much, with the exception that I'm more aware of how gluten sensitivities may be playing in, and inflammation. So those were probably the two biggest things that my awareness was enhanced by when I became a practitioner of this particular lifestyle. So, you know, in general, I just think that it's easier for me to sort of see whether those things are a problem in a person, and now I have a better approach for providing them dietary advice, I think.
Well, one of the other things that you have, and I think that's one of the meanings of the name of your practice, Primal Grounding, is it has something to do with earthing. Can you tell me a little bit more about earthing?
Sure. So this is something that I have practiced for decades, but actually didn't ever have a name for it. I grew up in a very rural part of northern New Mexico, basically spent my entire childhood outside. You know, we were running around barefoot whenever we could. We were up and down in the river. We swam in ponds. We played in the ditch. I mean, we were just outside and in the dirt and getting muddy all the time. And sort of, and even as I became an adult, you know, I've always just been drawn. I'm a rock climber. My husband and I climb, and so we would often spend, you know, most of our weekends and our evenings out at the climbs. We're blessed to live in an area where there's a lot of climbing. And, you know, you're just laying on the rocks. You're down on the ground. You're standing barefoot. And I never really ever gave much thought to this. You know, it was just what I did. And as I became a mother and as work became, you know, more important in my life, just being the provider for my family, because I also work, I'm an ecologist and I work as a technical writer. And, you know, so work just, it consumed. So I'm like, I'm so busy, you know, I have my family that I have to take care of. I'm working, I have to go take care of my house and my chores and everything else. And I realized that I wasn't outside as much, and I wasn't climbing as much, and I wasn't just, you know, sitting on the ground and observing nature as much. And about almost 3 years ago, I was put in a position where I was about to lose my job. And basically because we're a federally funded facility, and the funding has decreased and they've shifted priorities. And so when that started happening and my coworkers, my direct coworkers, were being laid off, I sort of created a mantra for myself, and I said, this is not going to happen to me. And I basically started going outside where I work. I have a canyon, a beautiful canyon that's just right outside the back door of where I work. And I started going out there and just sitting on the rocks, and I started writing, and I was meditating, and I was observing. And I was doing this 2-3 times a day. I actually stopped going to a lot of the exercise classes that I had attended in favor of just sitting and being in nature. And one day I read an article, it was probably on Dr. Merkela's website, and it was about earthing. And I read the article, and it linked to the earthing book, and I thought, oh my God, that's exactly what I have been doing, and I had no idea. And that's what I've always known. And when I started kind of feeling separated and divorced from nature, and when things started getting really stressful, it was interesting that that's what I went back to. And so the more, of course, I've researched about earthing, the more I understand that there are real health benefits. You know, it decreases blood pressure. You know, it has marked influence on the blood, and they've actually measured that the blood, now I can't remember, the density of the blood is
viscosity?
Thinner. Yes, yes. So the viscosity is thinner when you're actually sitting on an earthing mat, or when people are being measured. And it also helps to decrease delayed onset muscle soreness, which I found to be very, very interesting. And I tested that theory out quite a lot this year. and it really, really helps me in particular. So, you know, it just made a lot of sense. And I've read a lot about electron exchange and the amount of nerve endings that we have in our feet and how that relays information to the brain. And also as a martial artist, we of course work out barefoot, and we used to attend these camps. They don't have them anymore, but they were in the upper New York State, and we'd be in the grass barefoot for 3 straight days working out, you know, for 2 hours, several times a day. And everybody felt great, despite the fact that we were basically annihilating ourselves. So, and you left feeling awesome because we were just outside and just doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing as humans.
There's so many different types of advice about post-recovery, you know, regimes or supplementation, and perhaps there is some value to all of them. You don't hear that much about taking off your shoes or leaving your shoes off and standing in the grass after a heavy workout or grappling session. That's great.
No, that's true. Yeah. So, you know, it's to the extent possible, I'm trying to get that message out there as well.
Well, New Mexico, like where I live in Virginia, although this last winter was very, very mild, you do have a winter there.
We do.
I've only been doing earthing for about the last year, and I think got it from the same source as you, Mercola, excuse me. I didn't practice it in the wintertime, but I remember the first time it was warm enough, let's say high 50s, low 50s, something like that. I just couldn't help myself. I took my shoes off. It felt great. It felt like a light switch had been turned on. And unless you have done it and actually feel the difference, what do you do in the wintertime, out of curiosity?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the cold. So I'm an ice climber and a skier and a snowboarder. So those things probably play into my desire to be cold as well. But I've been also reading a lot about cold thermogenesis. And so last year, you know, as I said, I had been sitting and I would write and meditate and stuff on the cliff edge. And when it started getting cold, so it was about like the end of October, we'll start getting snow. And then all the way through November, I had not gone outside and sat on my rock. And then I signed up for a MoveNat seminar, well, basically a MoveNat workshop last year. It was a cold weather MoveNat workshop with Irwin McCord. And in preparation for that, we knew we were going to be in the cold and doing cold water dips. I decided I better get my butt outside and start getting acclimated to the cold again. And around the middle of November, I started feeling really terrible. And I had been in ketosis for quite a long time. For me, anyways, it was sort of the end of my I don't know, basically probably my weight loss plateau. So I'd lost 35 pounds in about 4 to 5 months when I went paleo. And then, you know, I tried to stay in ketosis because I was having such wonderful performance benefits from being in ketosis. I was never bonking. I felt like I could just go forever, whether I was riding my bike or running or doing taekwondo. And but in November, I really started feeling terrible, and you know, my hormones were sort of tanking, and so I did start to increase some carbohydrates. I'm still not sure if that's really the route to go or whether there's a better method, but the other thing that I did was I started getting back outside. And once I started getting back outside and sitting on the rocks, and I was actually doing cold water soaks in spring, that's in a canyon where I live, and once I started doing that, I started feeling an increase in my health almost instantly. And the other interesting thing that came about with that is that I was just simply not hungry ever. So yes. Even through the entire MoveNat workshop, which we were outside for basically 8 hours a day doing MoveNat skills and training, hiking, running, I never was hungry during that entire time. I had to force myself to eat. And even then it was like I would be stuffed on a half of a can of sardines, and like sometimes just like 2 macadamia nuts and a handful of like, little chocolate pieces were fine. So I was really astonished at that. That it just really blew my mind, actually.
Well, you bring up a great point.
But I
go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, so as far as the cold goes, last year, so basically from November all the way until the beginning of April, I was cold soaking outside 2 days a week on average until the bugs started to become a problem. When I had spiders crawling over my head, I said I was definitely with the spring. So I'm
Yes.
looking forward to getting back to the spring when it's cold.
Well, you bring up an excellent point of if you can't have your, I wouldn't recommend people walking outside barefoot in the snow for hours at a time. And I don't think that's what anybody's advocating. The cold immersions, I do sort of a cheat of that. I finish off the showers, 3 or 4 minutes of cold water, as much as I can take. I will have to check out the cold immersion therapy. But the point that you were making of just getting outside for 10, 15 minutes of walking, no matter how cold it is, you do acclimate very easily. And it is like a workout. If you walk 15 minutes in 20-degree weather, that's almost the equivalent, and I have no statistics to verify this. It's just me throwing this out there. It's like a 30-minute walk, a 40-minute walk.
Right.
It feels great, and you feel like you have basically toughened yourself up. You get those winter blues out. So maybe that's part of the answer is, as you said, just getting outside, doing some cold water immersion that acclimates you better, and then stick your feet in the ground as soon as you're able to take it, right?
Right, definitely.
One of the other things I want to talk to you about is just New Mexico. I mean, you've mentioned it a few times. It's just the imagery of you sitting on the cliffs and going into these canyons and these springs. That's so great. I haven't really met someone from New Mexico. Most of the people I meet from New Mexico have moved there. We have a few friends. So
Sure.
what is it like in New Mexico? Is it really just a great place to practice all of the things that you're doing in primal grounding?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so beautiful here. I live in Los Alamos, and Los Alamos is basically a mountain community, and then we have what are called mesas, and basically the entire mountain chain where I live, called the Jemez Mountains, is the rim of an ancient volcano. There's actually a big caldera up above where I live, just about 12 miles to the west. So our mountains are the edge of an old volcano. The mesas were formed by ash flows. And then, of course, over time, water, rain, stuff have eroded the canyon, created the canyons, basically. And then the ash flows go into the basalt flows, so the little community that's just to the south of where we live, White Rock is what it's called, it's all sitting on basalt, and so there's a lot of climbing there. And then there's just a huge valley. It's called the Rio Grande Valley, so the Rio Grande flows through there. And then we have the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to the east of us, and they are huge. They go up to 13,000 feet. That's what makes Santa Fe and Taos so popular, is their mountain community and their amazing vistas and views that they have. So New Mexico is a very interesting place to live. It's got a rich culture, a rich history, between the Native Americans, the Pueblos, the former cliff dwellers that are here, that lived here thousands of years ago. Even just hundreds of years ago they were here. So there's a lot of ancient, culture that kind of goes along with the lifestyle here. There's sort of the pastoral farming community, the people who've lived here for centuries and were basically always self-sustaining and continue to be self-sustaining on a small level. They certainly couldn't support a big economy, I don't think, but it's just a magical place. It's really, truly a magical place.
Well, all of the peoples that you just mentioned, it's on one hand, it's a rather disparate list, but on the other hand, I can absolutely see the common thread that relates all of those people together, whether it be the Pueblos or the rugged individuals that moved west on the wagon trains to perhaps the more recent waves of people that are, into mindfulness and awareness. I mean, probably a cowboy or cowgirl that was on the plains had a certain level of awareness very much akin to someone practicing meditation today.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the cowboy poet,
Yes. Right.
So.
Well, just to start finishing up this interview, thank you so much for your time. How are, speaking of awareness, we were talking earlier at the Ancestral Health Symposium about how you're amongst people and you could talk about these subjects. I have just now started practicing mindfulness and awareness. I feel great on the days I can set some time aside, and that then allows me to, when I am under stress, it's sort of like muscle memory. I can relax and get back and stay in the now. How do you broach mindfulness and awareness to loved ones and friends or colleagues without it being out of context in the subject? What is the proper way to introduce someone to that? In other words, what's your elevator speech, whether it to be to clients or to other people? I have found that I'm still not embarrassed to bring it up, but it's not a subject, unfortunately, that people freely talk about it unless you know what it is. Because some people say meditation, I thought I knew what it was until I actually practiced it.
Right. Well, I always basically just start with a story. So, I mean, if you can talk about your own experience, I think that always is something that people are willing to listen to, especially if you're not trying to say, well, you need to do this.
Right.
You'd really benefit from this. But just, saying, wow, God, I've started doing this and I'm seeing some really amazing things happen in my life. I was fortunate because I attended the Evergreen State College, which is in Olympia, Washington. It's an alternative school. And my senior year there, I had the amazing opportunity of taking a class that combined meditation, rock climbing, and lichen biology. But the class started with a 12-day silent meditation at a Vipassana center in Washington. And I had no idea what I was getting into at all. I really honestly had no idea. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, also took the class. And it turned out that he was like the best meditator of anybody in the whole entire class. We were all so astonished. He sat perfectly straight backed. He was just like the perfect meditator. And he'd had some experience with it because he'd been doing it in Aikido. I got there and I just, my mental, just basically the way my brain took the first several days of this particular silent meditation experience, I just shut down. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was being brainwashed for a couple days, and then all of a sudden I started having like these amazing breakthroughs, and my attention became amazing, and my dreams were extremely vivid during this experience. It was amazing. I still remember those dreams today. It's been like 25 years ago, and it's just astonishing. And so I'm thankful that I had this amazing introduction to meditation. And then mindfulness and meditation were a part of the entire class that we took for that entire quarter. And so as a result of that, basically that foundation, meditation has just always been right there for me, even though it's not something that I've practiced for many, many years. And the mindfulness, I think that goes along with martial arts as well. So if you're a martial artist, you have to be aware. You want to pay attention to your surroundings when you're out and about, and it extends to eating, mindfulness in eating, and just being aware of what you're doing, how you're cooking, what you're doing while you're eating, whether you're sitting on the computer or reading, or whether you're just actually sitting and being mindful of what you're eating. So, I think that to bring it all back together, I just really think that if you tell your experiences to somebody and they're interested in them, they'll probably be more receptive to maybe trying something out in their own lives. And, my parents, I don't think they would ever become meditators. They're certainly not going to become martial artists. My mother has tried to go on to sort of a paleo-type template diet, but she, it's something she's working at. So I think that all we can do is just sort of explain our experiences, talk about it, introduce healthy ideas to people, and if they're interested, they'll come back and they'll want to get some more.
Well, thank you very much, Kristi. After this conversation, I do feel grounded. I really do. It was very nice to meet you. I look forward to seeing you at a future Ancestral Health Symposium with our Vibrams on, or perhaps we'll just go barefoot. There was a lot of people there barefoot.
I like to wear leather-soled shoes when I'm out and about, so I wear moccasins a lot.
Oh, I got to get a pair made somewhere in New Mexico.
Yeah, actually, there's great websites out there. You can just get some awesome handmade moccasins.
I
can send you the link.
Oh, please do. Please do. And we will link up a lot of the sites that we discussed here, certainly Kristi's Primal Ground site. Looking forward to hearing more about your practice. And one of the things that probably helped you was getting prepared for this conference. Was it probably primed the pump on some of your book preparation. So I look forward to hearing more about that too.
Well, thank you so much for this interview opportunity. It was really enjoyable, and I'm so happy to have met you.
Likewise. Thank you, Kristi. And that's a wrap for episode 1 of the 3A's podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. On a weekly basis, we're going to be publishing podcasts with interviews of personal trainers, doctors involved in the ancestral health community, researchers, economists that are going to be making sense of what's going on in the global economic headlines. So thanks for joining us. See you next time on the 3A's.